Howdy cows. Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. Last summer we had this addition to our barn built that the cattle are in, 20 foot by 40 foot, and it's worked out great. One of the things that we've tried this first winter of using the barn is a deep bedding or deep litter system. And in this video I'm going to go over kind of how that bedding method works and what we've seen so far. First thing is I'm going to get these guys out of here so we can all see what the bed looks like. Come on, let's go. Come on. Out you go, guys. Come on, Daffy. Come on. Let's go. Out you go. Deep bedding is a really old system. It's probably the system your great-grandparents used, and it's simply adding carbon-rich material to the top of the pen every once a week or so. It all depends on animal load, with the idea being that you start a compost reaction in the bed and you just keep building it up the whole year long. And sometimes deep beds can be 3 or 4 or more feet tall. When I was a kid and we'd clean out the bank barn with forks into the manure spreader, they were that deep. You could barely stand up in the barn because the bedding pack was so high. Deep bedding packs were largely repopularized by Joel Salatin, who's written extensively on them, and it's the way that I first learned about them. They have some significant advantages. They're a good way to keep the cattle warm in the winter because as compost gets going, you get warmth coming up through that pack. It gives the cattle a nice surface to walk on. This is a nice spongy surface. I kneel on it and it's nice and comfortable, kind of like a couch. The next benefit is that it encourages the reproduction of beneficial bacteria. And I found a number of sources that have stated that the beneficial bacteria, the decomposer bacteria, will actually crowd out harmful bacteria in the bedding pack. Now, I went looking and I couldn't find any quantified results, measurements of that statement, but I can see how it would be the case, especially when the composting temperature gets up above 100 degrees and those bacteria really get going and crowd out the harmful ones. The last benefit is it's less work. It's less work than coming in here and cleaning out the pen and rebedding the pen every couple of days. And that makes a big difference when you're running a farm. Cornell University has done a bunch of studies where they actually went through, built a suitable structure for deep bedding on a dairy farm, ran the cattle in that structure for a winter season and measured the quantity of labor, the impact on cattle health, the things that are important for dairy cattle like mastitis, hoof problems, health problems, and they found that deep bedding outperformed both concrete floor and sand bed systems. Yes, I know you guys would like to come back in. I'll be done in a few minutes. This bedding system depends for its success on decay, something maybe we don't think about as much as we should these days. We're focused on cleanliness and antiseptic qualities, but rot and decay are really important on a farm because they link life to rebirth. That's what happens in between. We live amidst it whether we like it or not. Anyway, the rot and decay happening in this system is composting. So here's what you need to have composting happen to keep track of when you're building a deep bed. You need moisture, the appropriate amount, not too much, not too little, and that's why how you deep bed will depend on how many animals you have coming in here and the loading that you're putting on the deep bedding pack. You need a green source, a nitrogen source, which in the deep bedding pack is the cow manure. You need a brown source, a carbon source. In our case, we're using hay to build our deep bed, but that can be hay, straw, wood chips, sawdust. Most organic things that are dead and dried out are rich carbon sources. If you follow that recipe, add all the ingredients together, and the proportions don't have to be exact. There's a lot of leeway on either side, greens and browns and things. The decomposer bacteria will come. They're all over in the environment. Wherever we pile anything that'll rot, it rots. They find it. What those decomposer bacteria do is they love to eat the nitrogen that's in the manure. They get in here and they multiply like crazy. Their population goes way up. They need the carbon source, the hay or the straw or the wood chips, to fuel their population expansion, because it's the building block of their cells, of those bacteria's cells. When they're done, when they can't find anything more to eat, their population collapses and they too become part of the great soil and great fertilizer you wind up with after about a year's worth of rotting of this mass. One final thing about composting: two major types: aerobic, where the bacteria require oxygen to stay alive, and anaerobic, where different kinds of bacteria require carbon dioxide to survive and do their thing. Anaerobic composting is much, much slower than aerobic composting. Here's our setup. We have a 20-foot wide by 40-foot deep cattle pen in here. We feed hay via this cattle pen. It's got a 12-foot clear dimension on the inside when it's empty, when there's no bedding. The cattle come here to eat and drink and lay down. They have a lounging yard which they can go out to whenever they want right next to it. This addition is built on a couple feet of porous, fairly porous stone, so the floor of it drains well. It's got a lot of ventilation, which is really important for keeping a deep pack. You want to be able to flush out excess moisture via good airflow, and we've got that coming through the pen. The cattle have been in their winter quarters for about 3 months now, and we've built the pack up to about a foot deep. We're using 3-year-old hay as our brown carbon-rich material, and as you can see, hopefully, the bed has this really spongy quality to it. It's very soft, but not so soft that you sink way in. It is comfortable. It's nice and soft. I think that's why the cattle like to lay on it. Our process for building the pack is simple. Once a week we come in here. We're using old round bales to build it. They're 3-year-old round hay bales. And we bed it real thick. And then we let the cattle work it in. By the end of that week, on the day before, we're going to bed again. It's pretty manure-y. It looks manure-y because the cattle's hooves will work this hay and mix it in with the manure, which is really kind of a benefit. You don't wind up with stratification of the greens and the browns. The cattle mix them all together, and then you come in, you put another layer of browns on, and the cattle mix those together. I'll show you the layers. So this is the top layer, bedded yesterday. Scrape that off. And then we get to the damper stuff underneath. And we have quite a tight pack underneath. But that is well mixed hay and manure and urine. About the moisture we want to see. Now as I dig this, I start to smell sweetness, which is decomposing manure. You get a sweetness out of it. There's no smell to the pack unless you disturb it this way. And the smell that you get when you disturb it is not a bad smell. Here's a close-up of the consistency for all those who are interested. This morning when my wife and I were out here, we brought a thermometer with us and measured the temperature of the pack. And down inside, it's running about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is about 20 degrees Celsius, compared to the floor temperature in the rest of the barn, for kind of apples to apples comparison, is about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature of the compost pack brings me to the issues we've seen with this method. The first is that this pack is running too cool. Optimal compost temperature when the bacteria really get going is between 90 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 30 to 60 degrees Celsius. Why isn't that happening with our pack? Well, I think it's two things. Number one, the pack isn't deep enough. We're only at about a foot deep. You really need to get 3-4 feet so you can build more heat toward the center of the pack. The other thing is the nature of using hay for the bedding pack. Because hay packs really tightly, you get more anaerobic composting than aerobic composting. So you get a slower reaction going on. How could we overcome that? Well, we could switch the bedding material to wood chips, but we're not going to do that because wood chips require us getting a method of transportation of them, a dump trailer. The town has wood chips for free, but we have hay that we need to use, so it just makes sense. I think we're getting the benefits out of this pile that we want. We're getting the start of fermentation early, the start of composting early, and we're getting warmth for the cattle and a soft surface for the cattle. So things don't always need to work perfectly. Good enough is good enough for me in this case. We also didn't really design this barn for a deep bedding pack, so the feeder panels are fixed, and that's going to limit the height of our bedding pack. We probably can go up another foot or so, and then it's going to have to be cleaned out. So it may make it to the end of this winter before we need to clean it out in April when the herd goes back out on pasture. We'll see. You can certainly make these panels vertically movable. There's all kinds of examples of folks that have done that, so you can raise them up with the bedding pack. You need to have a way to raise your feed or your hay up as well if you feed inside. And people often use cribbing underneath the stock tanks, which is what we're doing here to bring the stock tank up with the bedding pack. The last issue that we've seen is getting the proper feel, and this is just my wife and I, to when the bedding pack needs to be refreshed with more carbon. You want to keep the proper consistency, not too wet, not too dry, and depending on the weather outside, which adds to the condition of the pack greatly because the cattle track so much stuff in, sometimes it gets a little too wet. Right now it's at the perfect consistency as far as I'm concerned. It's right where we want it, and so the goal is to maintain it this way. It's just a learning curve, that's all. I think this bedding pack is doing us a lot of good. It's much better than any other pack that we've built in the winter down in our old barn, because we couldn't really build deep bedding packs down there. And we're real happy with the way that this is working out for the cows. It winds up saving us labor, and it winds up in happier animals. Our cows have weathered this winter in the best body condition that I've seen in all of our years of raising cattle, and I think having this nice warm bed for them is part of that. You can certainly see how happy they are when they come in after we've put down a fresh layer. I hope this video was informative. I'm going to leave in the video description right down below a couple of the papers that I've read on deep bedding, and if you want more information you can look through them. Some people have gone into an awful lot of detail with the study of it. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Now I can let these guys back in. They're probably starving by now. Oh, and I forgot one of the greatest benefits of a deep bedding pack. The cattle get taller every day. They're growing by leaps and bounds.